Well, it's a great pleasure to stand today on behalf of the residents of Nanaimo, Alberni, and enter this debate on an extremely important piece of federal legislation. Bill C4 is an act to implement measures contained in Budget 2013. It's the second such bill, therefore we could refer to it as BIA 2, Budget Implementation Act 2. Budget 2013 continues our government's drive towards creating jobs, promoting economic growth in a highly competitive world. It also continues our steadfast drive towards returning to fiscal balance by 2015. Why this is relevant and how it's managed is extremely important to the lives of each and every Canadian. First, let me remind those watching the debate that Canada was slammed by an economic tsunami in 2008, one that was not of our making, but one that crashed across our borders. It started south of our border with a subprime mortgage meltdown. And as the credit crisis and housing defaults put financial institutes in peril, the USA and other nations backstopped the banks to prevent panic south of the border. And of course, they spent billions of public dollars to prevent, in bailout money, went to institutions like Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae. Businesses had trouble maintaining cash flow, and major industries like the auto sector danced along the edge of insolvency. It quickly spread around the globe. Many nations were faced with huge financial commitments to stabilize their financial institutions and prevent wholesale collapse. As the world economy spun, our government had to act fast to keep Canadians employed, to provide incentives and retraining programs. Part of the Economic Action Plan was targeted short-term spending on infrastructure, investments that would generate economic activity, keep people employed, and improve the quality of life in communities across Canada. Do you know, Mr. Speaker, our plan worked. In fact, it worked so well that since the depths of the recession in July 2009, we've generated nearly 1 million new jobs, more than 80% of those in the private sector. We've been driving towards balanced budgets year by year with targeted measures to keep our economy moving forward. Mr. Speaker, Canada has the best job creation record in the G7, the most stable banking sector, and the lowest debt to GDP ratio. So why is this important? It is because debt is strangling economic opportunity and competitiveness in many nations. The commitment of this government and this Prime Minister is that we'll bring Canada back to balanced budgets, and we'll do it without raising taxes, without slashing transfers to the provinces for services that Canadians depend upon. I'm pleased to report that we're on track to do exactly that. Our Minister of Finance recently reported that we'll achieve that objective not only on time, but ahead of time. We will, barring world circumstances beyond our sight or control, will achieve that objective and a healthy surplus by fiscal 2015. So, Mr. Speaker, Budget 2013 and Bill C4 continue the drive towards balanced budgets. There are provisions that impact British Columbia in a significant way. For example, $92 million for innovation in the forest sector. These funds will help our forest industry continue the transformation to compete in new global realities. Budget 2013 included measures to protect iconic West Coast Pacific salmon. In fact, the entire Pacific salmon stamp collected from recreational fishers on the coast, Mr. Speaker, it's a stamp valued at just over $6, and for years, $1 from that stamp used to go to the PSF, the Pacific Salmon Foundation. And now the entire value of that stamp, which will be a value of about $1.2 million, will go to the Pacific Salmon Foundation and into projects that restore salmon habitat, that in partnership with local environmental groups, we have Salmon Enhancement Society, stream keepers, who have great interest in bringing them back stream by stream, which is in fact the motto of the Pacific Salmon Foundation. In addition to that, this budget brought in the recreational Fisheries Conservation Partnership Program. That's a further $10 million over 2 years to help activist groups like the ones I mentioned advance causes that help restore fisheries habitat, improve the riparian zones, remove obstacles that prevent fish from getting up to their spawning grounds. And like one project we just announced in our riding, where a culvert had been eroded, a major highway culvert, restored so that the fish can get past that obstacle and up to the spawning grounds. These projects collectively have a huge impact on helping our great iconic salmon resource on the West Coast. The funds dramatically increase the reach of our premier Salmon Habitat Restoration Institute on the coast. Doing so, of course, it allows nature to do her thing. As we remove obstacles and improve the riparian zones and improve the spawning grounds, it helps Mother Nature help the salmon do what they do best, and that's just reproduce successfully and create opportunities both commercially, create opportunities for First Nations through their food, cultural, ceremonial programs, and also for recreational anglers, something that's been one of the reasons many people move to British Columbia, to coastal BC, to take part in a tremendous fishing opportunity. Mr. Speaker, since 2006, our Economic Action Plan has cut taxes in over 150 different measures to make our economy more productive. As a result, the average Canadian family is saving about $3,200 each and every year in reduced federal taxes. And that means more money to meet family needs and to address priorities of their own choosing. On this side of the House, we think that's a good idea, allowing Canadians to manage their own money and to invest in priorities that strengthen their family, that meet the needs, that help children participate in activities that are meaningful for them and make sure the needs of the family are met. Bill C4 continues our drive to job creation and economic stimulus. In the time that remains, I would like to refer to a few of these measures. Let's talk about renewing the hiring tax credit for small business. Other measures like closing tax loopholes to ensure tax fairness, like one I mentioned earlier, accelerated capital cost allowance in a question to the member opposite, a measure that will allow manufacturers to invest in equipment upgrades, and other measures like extending the lifetime capital gains exemption to increase the rewards for investing in small business in Canada. Measures like closing tax loopholes to protect the inherent integrity and fairness of our tax system. So, Mr. Speaker, the hiring tax credit, the number one priority of our government is creating jobs. This measure recognizes the important role of small business in sustaining Canadian communities. The Economic Action Plan 2013 proposes to extend and expand the temporary hiring credit for small businesses. The measure provides up to $1,000 credit against an increase in EI premiums for that business. Small business, Mr. Speaker, are the engines of job creation. This measure was first introduced in Budget 2011. It helps defray the cost of taking on a new employee and permits our local employers to take advantage of emerging economic opportunities. Mr. Speaker, it's estimated some 560,000 small businesses could potentially benefit from this measure, saving them an estimated $225 million in federal taxes in 2013. Tax fairness. Since 2006, and including measures that are in this 2013 Economic Action Plan, the government has introduced more than 75 measures to improve the integrity of our tax system. Now, two examples from this budget, 2013, are to close tax loopholes that permit certain individuals and or institutions to avoid tax. Included in our stiff penalties to curb a disturbing new trend, that would be the electronic suppression of sales software, which is designed to falsify records for the purpose of tax evasion. Specifically, the following administrative money penalties and criminal offenses apply. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Using electronic suppression of sales software, an administrative monetary penalty of $5,000 for the first infraction, up to $50,000 on subsequent infractions. Possession and acquisition, even higher penalties for the manufacture, development, sale, and possession, even higher penalties. There are also criminal offenses for those involved in this type of tax avoidance, Mr. Speaker. Those measures are broadly supported by business and job creators across Canada. If I had time, I would quote the Canadian Institute of Chartered Accountants. They issued a statement commenting on closing the tax loopholes and tax fairness measures in the budget, and they concluded by saying that they support efforts to maintain the integrity of our tax system. It sounds like my time is pretty near Up, Mr. Speaker. A few seconds left. If I had time to go on, I would say that the tax relief for new manufacturing and equipment is a very important measure, and there's just many other measures in this budget that are important for advancing our economy, bring us back towards balanced budgets, and I hope all the members opposite will join with us in passing these measures to keep Canada moving in the right direction. Thank you.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires? Honorable député de
The Honourable Member for Rimouski-Neigette, Témiscouata-les-Basques. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I listened attentively to the member's speech. There are many things that he mentioned in his speech, but there are some things he didn't mention. And one of the things that interests me the most in Bill C4 is the gradual elimination of the tax credit for labour-sponsored venture funds. That is very important in Quebec. There are $10 billion in capital, and that is all reinvested in Quebec and outside of Quebec in small businesses. So that makes Quebec a leader in venture capital. I'm talking about a leader, not talking about a leader in Canada, but a leader international, because Quebec, as compared to its economic clout, is third place among OECD countries and invests some 3 times more venture capital than Canada and more than 4 times that of Ontario. But the gradual elimination, well, in fact, right now there are 160,000 jobs in Quebec that are maintained by venture capital that is paid in by workers. The gradual elimination of these funds will suppress some 20,000 of these jobs. So for a government that claims to be for job creation and economic growth, this is a very bad measure for Quebec. So I'd like to know what the member across the way thinks. I would like to hear his comments on the elimination of that tax credit and why the government, without evidence, is going in that direction, whereas Canada desperately needs venture capital because private capital funds want to continue to benefit from these funds. Thank you.
Nanaimo, Alberni.
Well, I thank the member for his interest and for the question, Mr. Speaker. The budget it's a constant in trying to balance a budget for a country the size of Canada and an economy like ours. There are many measures that have to be kept in balance. And part of my speech mentioned measures that we're closing, developing situations where tax loopholes have been exploited by certain individuals and others where investments that were strategically designed to help certain sectors advance interests, times have changed. For example, there's changes here to measures that were brought in the 70s to help credit unions in the country. And now with advances and changes in the budget over the years, those measures are no longer needed, so they're being phased out. There are measures in here for the mining sector that are being phased out, some by 2015 and some by 2017. And the measures the member referred to are part of the ongoing evolution of shifting to make sure that our tax plan remains balanced and fair and representative, and that it delivers the kinds of benefits that keep our economy moving in the right direction. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires. The Honourable Member for Winnipeg North.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, I do find it somewhat amazing the number of times in which this particular member has made reference to balancing the budget and this government's desire to balance the budget. In reality, this government inherited a multi-billion-dollar surplus from a Liberal government, and prior to the recession even starting, they turned that multi-billion-dollar surplus into a multi-billion-dollar deficit, and now they're trying to convince Canadians that they could actually bring us back to a balanced budget sometime in the future. There's a credibility issue there, Mr. Speaker, that they're going to have to deal with. Having said that, my question to the member is, why does the government choose to bring in so much legislative change through the back door of a budget piece of legislation when in fact it should be separate pieces of legislation? And that's really what C4 is about. It's using C4 as a backdoor for this sneaky government through the PMO's office to bring in numerous changes to other pieces of legislation. Why is the Conservative government doing that?
The Honourable Member for Nanaimo, Alberni, you have about 50 seconds.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the member for his interest in the question. And frankly, the member also has selective memory, it appears, because he says that we inherited a great surplus. And yeah, billions. And in fact, we actually managed that economy so well in 2006, 2007, 2008, we paid down $37 billion on our national debt. And Mr. Speaker, that actually took us to the lowest national debt in 25 years at about $458 billion. And of course, the member would probably like to acknowledge that, in fact, the economic downturn was worldwide. It didn't start in this nation. And so we had to respond, and we had to keep people employed, and we had to do something that this government is reluctant to do. We had to run a deficit in order to keep Canadians on track. But unlike the government opposite, when they were faced with a deficit, we didn't slash transfers to the provinces for health care, social services, and education. We're determined to balance the budget by growing the economy, and without increasing taxes, Mr. Speaker. We're on track to do that to keep Canada going in the right direction.
Resuming.